So welcome, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm Bruce Danielson. I'm the only independent candidate for prosecutor. I'm the nonpartisan, not independent candidate. And 4 years ago, I ran against Russ Hauge, our current prosecutor, because I recognized there was a problem. And one of the things that our next prosecutor is going to have to do in managing that office is recognizing problems, knowing when you have a problem in either the civil, criminal, or domestic relations unit, which comprise the three elements of the prosecutor's office. And there's, of course, there's subdivisions and different things that are handled through their administrative law and the like. Of the candidates, I'm the one that has the hands-on, in the field, in the courtroom experience in civil, criminal, and domestic law. I've handled them all. I've started cases from the beginning through trial, civil, criminal, and domestic law. I spend my days in court. I spend my days drafting pleadings and understanding the law, or trying to understand the law at times. I'm the one who has to put it together and understand where the conflicts lie, where the problems exist. And as the next prosecutor, my intent is to go into that office, review the procedures and the policies of the prosecutor's office, and what I believe would be an appropriate way of putting it, right the ship. Thank you.
Let's follow right on top of that one. When you say right the ship, what's the role of the prosecutor's office? How do you define that role? And
it doesn't have just one definition, but several things. Okay, we'll start with the basic premise on and it's usually is the civil and administrative end, that the prosecutor's office advises the county commissioners, the Department of Community Development, all the other government agencies with regards to legal issues that might come before them. Lately, there's been a lot of issues with the Department of Community Development. And the prosecutor's office, working with the Department of Community Development, should advise them as to, say, a proposed ordinance. Title V, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with this, but they had tried to pass, there was an ordinance posted on the DCD website that said we can do certain things. We, the Department of Community Development, can do pretty much get into your house anytime we want to and have you arrested if you don't let us in. Now, Larry Keaton said he ran that, it was drafted by his staff, ran by the prosecutor's office, and then posted on a website, but it was a mistake. But what happens is the prosecutor's office is supposed to be working with the Department of Community Development to advise them as to what's legal and what isn't legal. So that's one of the roles of the prosecutor's office, is to advise the county government. But unlike a traditional law firm, where a traditional law firm, you hire them, they are your attorneys, and they'll pretty much do anything you want them to do as long as it's ethical and reasonable. A prosecutor's office stands in a different position, because the prosecutor's office is not only representing the county government and advising them, but the government is composed of the people. And in giving your advice, you have to take in consideration and really serve the people. That you can't give advice to the county government which would start violating the rights of the citizens or taking away their privileges. So, with regards to the civil end, that's as short an explanation as possible. With regards to the criminal end, it's the prosecutorial arm, that the only option after the police are arrest someone, is to move it into the criminal arena, formal charges, and that's the job of the criminal division. I think that's a fairly straightforward explanation of it. With regards to the domestic end, this is the child support division, which also works along with federal agencies and under both federal and state law to enforce support orders, deadbeat dads, and the like. And so their role at that point, though they may be representing the state because the state will be collecting on behalf of an individual, really you're representing the individual because you're trying to recover funds for that individual. Sometimes the state has a stake in it because they paid out certain public benefits and the state wants to get repaid. Oftentimes, though, the states have to, under federal law, maintain a program to collect funds for someone whether they receive state funds or not. And that's what the Division of Child Support. So again, we're into that. It's a hyper type of analysis as to their who they represent. State goes after somebody, but for the individual who's owed support.
You had about 47% of the vote, came out 4 years ago. Tell me first why you decided to run again. What made you want to go through that whole process, because I know it's not easy. And then the second part is, what's different about you as a candidate today that would try to earn you a couple more votes?
Well, last run was difficult. It was it's a tiring process. But the problems that I saw before have not changed. If anything, they've gotten worse. And the latest lawsuit with the gun club is just another example of that. This is just but one example. There are a number of other cases that I've watched charging decisions be made or not made, and I know this office, the prosecutor's office, can do much better than it has been. I believe that people want to believe that our prosecutor is doing the best job for them. But it's also a recognition, I believe, in the votes I received, that people recognize there's a problem and that the office is not really serving them the way they believe they need to be served. So there is a job left undone. And we may have a prosecutor in office, but the operations of the prosecutor's office need to change dramatically, I think, for the better, both in investigations. I think the David Horton case was a classic. The young man that was killed on Bainbridge Island. There were some issues, and I think I'm sorry, yes. There were some issues about the investigation from the prosecutor's office early on. Your paper reported on it. And the fact that our prosecutor's office, after initially taking and writing a report, as the facts developed, it turns out that report was inaccurate. And the buck stops at the top of the prosecutor when they make a mistake. And every office will make mistakes. There is no way it can avoid it. But you have to own it, and you have to correct it, and you have to let people know that you own it and you have corrected it. And whatever happened that caused that mistake has to be addressed so it doesn't happen again. Because important rights are at stake in every case. Civil, criminal, family law. And so I don't see that happening with our current prosecutor. And that's why I'm running.
So it's a matter of, is it organizationally you see mistakes, or is it errors you see that are happening, or is it philosophy that you think could be different?
I think it's a little of both. I'm a big believer in mentoring and understanding. I was a young attorney. I started off with a small law firm, and I had a mentor. And he started teaching me early on, this is how you're going to do things. This is how it's done. This is the way you treat other opposing counsel. This is how you handle a case. This is how you do an investigation. And he forced me through some hoops that I wasn't necessarily comfortable in, but I learned things every time I did that. But one of the things that was important in that was demeanor. And you're talking about the way you address people. And my experience has been that in management, the top dictates how everyone else below will act and react. If the management is friendly, open, engaging, and honest, that will happen throughout the ranks. I'm not saying that the staff is anything but honest, but what I am saying is that a lot of times it almost seems to be there's an attitude of us against them, and I don't think that's appropriate.
One of the big things we talked about 4 years ago when you were here was the Marcus Carter case.
Sure.
Obviously, it's still going on. There's now an appeal over the weapon itself. How do I ask this? Do you think that, obviously, you are hearing that from people probably who voted for you 4 years ago. That's where some of the complaints come from, as far as how that's been handled. Well, for how much is that still driving your decision?
That is an element, but nothing more. Because the Marcus Carter case is indicative of a deeper problem. This is a symptom of the problems. And this is the one that's the easiest to identify. Matter of fact, it's a case study, as we all like to use something that we can point to and say, yeah, this represents what's going on in this office. As I just mentioned, the problems persist. Title V, that they were trying to somehow push off on the citizens, and now the prosecutor's office has disavowed any knowledge of it. Well, this is the type of stuff that's going on. It has nothing to do with the gun color, but it has everything to do with the operations of the office. And so this is also, and then again back to the Bainbridge Island shooting and the investigation. These are ongoing problems. So the gun club one, no, I would never run on the single issue.
Maybe this is another way to kind of push on that a little farther. Outside of those couple of anecdotes that read that, what about some of the things that have happened in this office, policies that have come about, programs that they've started? Are there any of those that you felt this is the wrong direction? We shouldn't go this way. We're putting our attention on the wrong priorities right now.
Certainly, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're talking about the initial decision to charge in district court virtually every case. Not quite, but pretty close.
Yeah, that's the type of thing.
Okay, that's a good example. I know that some of the other candidates have taken a different view of this, and then I probably will. We have Russ on one end who likes this program, thinks it's the greatest thing.
Let me this is the same thing we talked to the other two candidates, the felony early.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just making sure. Yeah. So we have Russ who thinks it's the greatest thing, wants to keep it going. Bob Scales who wants to, of course, remove it, and I'm not sure where Tina stands on it. And I respect everyone's opinion. The way I view the program, though, is that it's not all or nothing, that there are elements of that program that can be salvaged. However, the way it's being operated, it's not workable, and it's not cost effective in any way, shape, or form. For example, I was pulling a number of court files on a number of repeat offenders that we seem to have more than enough of in this county. And I noted that they were being charged in district court. So we have a district court charging, we have a prosecutor down there, we start the process in district court, and then we roll it out and we charge it in superior court. And we have a prosecutor go to that hearing and then the omnibus hearing, et cetera, et cetera. We're not saving anything. We know where it's going to go. But why are we charging it in district court? Why are we spending the time and effort there? The value, in my opinion, of the district court charging policy is that when you have a first-time offender, somebody you do not want to saddle with a felony because you believe that you can work with them and they have a chance to rehabilitate themselves, that is a good place to figure these things out. When you have a career criminal, and we have a number of them, again, I looked up a number of these individuals that have been charged. Matter of fact, my campaign manager had her house burglarized. And I ran the background on this individual. He'd been charged numerous times, 2004, 2008, and here we are in, I think it was 2012. They charged him in, they started in, I think the 2008 started in district court, and then they moved it up. But nonetheless, we have repeat offenders. We know that there's no use charging them in district court because that's not where they belong. They have committed serious crimes, and they're going to continue to commit serious crimes. And this is not news to the prosecutor because before they file the charging documents, they know this person's background from all over, not just Kitsap County. So with regards to that policy and program, I see something different than the other candidates. And that's how I'd approach it. The drug court's an interesting one. And that's really, and they're talking about this as a national move. And I think what's happening here with the drug court and some of the other courts is it's a recognition. The drug courts aren't, and this, at least in this Kitsap County, it wasn't created. It wasn't created by the prosecutors, it was created by the courts themselves. Why? You have to ask, would they create a special court? It's because we have an ongoing problem, in particular in this case, in Kitsap County, of the prosecutor not really looking at the case and not looking at the individuals, not looking at the problems and the priorities and the treatment options. The drug court is the court's way of forcing the prosecutor to look at things differently. Whether they want to say that now, they embrace it now, I'm glad for them. But one of the policies, and I think is a huge mistake in Kitsap County, and I mentioned this at Eggs and Issues this morning, is that you have a number of people that don't fall into those special categories, and they slip between the cracks of the system. So you don't qualify for, say, Veterans Court, or you don't qualify for drug court, or mental illness. Yet you have a chance for rehabilitation, you have a chance to change your life, to do something different, to make amends, to become a productive citizen without being labeled a felon. Yet you may not get that opportunity. An individual, a young man I knew, it was a stupid stunt on his part involving a camera and body parts. Yet he faced charges in this county, and he had to plea out. It cost him a college scholarship. It was absurd. And the kid had no record, nothing. He was clean, and he was stupid. But for what he did, this became a problem. And he didn't qualify for any special courts. The Veterans Court is a prime example of, we could laud the Veterans Court, but what we haven't done is ask, why wasn't the prosecutor's office looking at veterans before they created the Veterans Court? So anyway, go ahead.
So it's not that the drug court is bad or inadequate somehow, not that the court is bad and inadequate,
No.
but there should be another such mechanism.
What I'm saying is that in each of these cases, you don't take a hardline approach with each case, and if it doesn't fit into a special category, then we have nothing to do with it. We handle it as one way. Having done it,
And having these other things creates kind of an unequal.
what I'm
system
saying
because you
is,
can put something.
what I'm saying is that the prosecutor has taken, and it varies because they will petition, either through a peer review or otherwise. But there's a pattern here of not looking at the case and not trying to make a decision based upon unique circumstances. When I'm doing criminal defense, if I find something that would mitigate my client's liability or fault, I go to the prosecutor and I say, look, let me explain something. This is what happened. I'll give you a classic example. Guy comes home without using a name. He finds his wife black and blue. He goes next door because the neighbor had beat his wife, and he pounds on the guy. That was not a good thing to do. It wasn't the right thing to do, but was it understandable? No criminal history, no nothing. Now, when the prosecutor saw this, she saw some guy who just jumped another guy and just beat him to death. Well, not to death, but beat him severely. But once I explained, he came home to see his wife crying and two black eyes, she said, understood. We ended up deferring prosecution. My guy had no criminal history, but because I could talk to the prosecutor and the prosecutor was willing to listen, and that's what I'm saying is not happening in this county, is that the prosecutors, and it varies, generally don't listen. They either, this is our marching orders, and we're looking at trying to get a good conviction rate and money.
So it's less a policy than a cultural on how people are treating other people.
I see it more as a policy.
How do you put that into a policy that the public understands?
Well, you'd have to do it the same way you try to educate your prosecutors, is that we look at each case will be individually analyzed to see if there are mitigating circumstances which would warrant different treatment. And I think you could just do it simply like that. Internally, it's a little more complex, of course. You'd have to evaluate a number of factors. But for the public, it would be, each case will be thoroughly examined and considered on its merits and the special circumstances.
You kind of hit on two of these things already. What we've done with each candidate is we've asked about three issues that we have tended to see in our headlines more frequently in the recent year, and asking how the prosecutor's office can play a role in each of them. One of them is drug use, particularly heroin. There's a rise in heroin cases, and we're noticing that. The second one is mental illness and how it intersects with the criminal justice system, using the jail as a house for. And the third is recidivism, reoffenders. The Bremerton Police Chief talks about having to get frequent flyers off the street, and that's where they're putting their focus. Take on each one of those briefly and say, here's how the prosecutor's office should be involved with that issue.
Okay, we'll start with recidivism. I had made a point of that in my log, because when our current prosecutor took office, and to date, the increase in recidivism, rearrest, has gone up roughly 400%. Actually, it's a little higher than that, almost 500%. And then you have to also consider that recidivism involves other factors and other arrests shortly thereafter. So sometimes you're going to have people that no matter what you do, they'll do a stupid crime, a small crime, and you're not going to be able to charge them for the extent of the law, and they've had a prior criminal history. But what we have to do when we see someone who has a pattern of violating the law at every turn, what we need to do as prosecutors then is to fully pursue them at every turn to try to make sure that they understand that what they have done is not acceptable. We're not going to tolerate it. And matter of fact, we're going to throw everything we have at you and let you know that this is not going to happen here. We don't have any control over how long they serve in jail. However, and this is something that came up at Eggs and Issues, and then I'll move on to the other issues, there is a standard sentencing range for a particular crime. And it usually, could be, say a crime has 4 to 8 months. And the prosecutor's office, as part of the plea deal, will oftentimes say, well, we want you to have 5 months. We'll agree to 5 months, and the judge can accept it or not. The judges generally tend to take that. But a lot of times what's happening in our prosecutor's office, not only are they undercharging, and that's career criminals, but they're also recommending at the low end or below the standard low end. And what you're doing is, and you can't stop all crime, you can't stop all recidivism, but what you can do is put a dent in it. And if not stop it, at least make it stand still. And that's one of the problems we're having here. I'm sorry, what were the other two you're at? Oh, mental illness.
Mental illness.
Okay, this is I think that's probably one of the more dicey and tricky issues with regards to how to deal with them. A lot of times, the way to, in my experience, has been to deal with mental illness is they don't necessarily qualify for involuntary commitment. You can use the system to get them treatment and care and then dismiss charges. One of the cases I had, it's, if you want to call it funny, as the attorney for an incompetent, the guy was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but when he was off his medications, he was more than a handful. Matter of fact, in court chambers, he went crazy because I was trying to explain to the prosecutor, who wasn't listening, that my client really wasn't a bad guy, but he needed his medication. And the prosecutor didn't believe me, and of course, when the guy started assaulting everyone in the room, then the prosecutor understood. The judge was good with it too, and they said, what do you want done? And I said, I want him arrested, I want him treatment, and I want him released. Because once he's okay, we'll be all right. So that was one way of dealing with, kind of that sticky problems with mental illness. What do you do with it? Someone had mentioned at the Eggs and Issues a triage type of program. Those are nice. A lot of times what you have though with somebody who's mentally unstable is that they'll resist all treatment. The case I just gave you was classic. He didn't like taking his medications. He liked without it. So sometimes the system can be used to start pushing people back into a program where they can be treated. And the last thing you need to do is add insult to injury by adding criminal charges on top of somebody's life when they haven't really done anything. There is no simple solution. There is no simple fix. A mental illness court isn't a bad idea.
Is an idea like the drug court?
Somewhat, yes, under the same principle. Again, there's no simple answer or no simple solution, but that's something to consider. But this also goes back into the prosecutorial discretion, looking at the case, looking at the individuals, trying to understand how we can make the system work for that particular person. So whether you have a mental illness court or not, there's no magic in just having a mental illness court. The magic is in understanding the problem and making a solid recommendation to the court that you're willing to go with that will help the individual when you know that their problems are medical and nothing more.
Sounds like you've had some clients kind of in this boat. Have they been in Kitsap County?
I've had a lot of clients in Kitsap County, but the ones that were, no, most of my guardians were in King or Snohomish.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you what your experience had been like from that perspective in the court system here.
I worked a lot with, early on when my mentor had me working a lot with people under guardianships who had severe personality issues, one way of putting it, and challenges in trying to keep them integrated in their own homes and lives is one of the challenges we had to go through. Is that you didn't want to incarcerate them, yet at the same time you didn't want to over-medicate them. So working to find that balance, and as a civil attorney at that point, trying to work with the guardian, that's a challenge. And in working through the different systems, DSHS, et cetera, and oftentimes with the police, because it's inevitable if somebody has a a psychological condition, they're probably going to do something stupid and run afoul of the law. And getting the police and the prosecutor's office to understand this is what the problem is. It's nothing more than that, and here's how we're going to fix it.
Well, and a lot of the times the police already know about the person, and mental health already knows about the person.
Yes.
They're aware of these folks. What would you say, because with a complex problem like that, you need all of these agencies working together. I mean, this is the whole point of that mental health tax, that we get a lot of people around the table so we can connect it to them. I guess maybe I'd ask what your opinion is of that particular tax and kind of the ideas that are coming out of it. What's the prosecutor office's role in shaping those decisions? And then also, what about you personally? What do you tell a voter who says, yeah, I'm the guy who can talk to all these different groups? Where have you done that before? How are you a good communicator to be part of that conversation?
Okay. Basically, what I first thing I always try to do is find a commonality in ideas and goals. Once you know that, once you know what everyone's goal is, because if you start out with no idea what they're going to do, you'll never reach any type of consensus. And in a situation like this, the consensus, I would assume, would probably be very early found out to be getting appropriate treatment. Then, as a prosecutor, working with them, offering something to each agency that you can do, a contact person, a program, a willingness to work, a willingness to help them draft, say, documents, and allowing someone to sign up for, and I'm talking about an agreement to submit themselves to inpatient treatment for, say, a week or 2 weeks. So offering your services where you can, not trying to tread into their territories and providing treatment and things like that. But working with people isn't a problem for me. That's the easy part. That's the most difficult part, is sometimes getting the pieces to all work together, understanding the chain of command and the communications necessary to make this happen. That's where the problems arise. And again, this is just, it's to me a fairly mechanical process, in that what you're trying to do is just get people to, you know, who to contact, who to work with, and what they're expected. And that's where the Office of the Prosecutor comes in, because helping to synthesize that expectation of each division. This is what you need to do for me, this is what I'll do for you, these are your assigned tasks, and these are your assigned tasks, and this is what we will do. So sitting down with groups like that is very easy. The trick sometimes becomes finding what areas of the law where there might be a hole, and this is where the blend of civil, criminal, and everything else comes into play. Because though the original action and this person may have come to attention to the prosecutor's office because of a criminal act, we also have to worry about civil liabilities and restraints, et cetera, and liabilities, say, for the county, in that we work with somebody, we're trying to get them in treatment, and they go out and commit a horrific crime. It's not unlike stopping a drunk driver and turning them loose and saying, I'll get you later. We can't do that. So letting each department know that our goal is to work with the individual, but also we have to cover our bases as prosecutors to make sure that the citizens of Kitsap County are safe, and that we try to avoid infringing on rights or costing the county a lot of money. It's a complicated process. Going through all the mechanisms and how it all fits together is one of the things that oftentimes lawyers look at one area or another, not understanding how they all intermesh at one point or another. So I'm sorry, it was a longer answer than
no,
you
that's
probably
fine.
wanted.
That's fine. And then the third one, we talked about drug court a minute ago, but that issue, heroin use in the area. We kind of talked about drug court. Could it be used more effectively than it's being used right now? Is it a criminal matter alone?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could it be more effective?
We've implemented drug court. There's other things going on, but we're still seeing a rise of heroin use in the area, and it's kind of a nationwide, more than just here.
Well, drug court really, what you're looking at with drug court is a court that is dealing with people that are caught and of course, amenable to treatment. And an increase in drug use is, I think, going to be expected. It just, whatever the flavor of the year happens to be, heroin happens to be the flavor, that probably because of price more than anything else. You're not going to, in my opinion, affect a large percentage of the population in drug court as to the population of drug users. The drug court serves that specialized role of trying to get them on track with their lives. With regards to stopping the importation and use of heroin, that's a whole different game. That involves a more aggressive policy working with police to go after dealers and suppliers. So I see these as two different issues, really.
What could the prosecutor's job be doing better in that criminal aspect of it then?
Well, now you're kind of getting into the police end, but
Right, there you go.
one of the things that I hear a lot of complaints about drug houses in Kitsap County, a lot of complaints, and I admittedly, we always have to protect, the civil rights of individuals. We can't do random stops and searches and seizures. It's strictly forbidden, and I stand by that. However, when we know that we have a drug house and we have people coming and going, we also know that those individuals at some point, one of them is going to run afoul of the law. And when they run afoul of the law, and especially if we catch them with things that we're looking for or don't want on our streets, at that point we can start working the process. At that time, you're probably starting to work with that individual to cut a deal. Because what we're looking for is something bigger than just you. We're looking for who gave you this, who did you buy it from, and where did you get it, that kind of thing. So instead of focusing on small prosecutions and turning them out quickly, work on a hard prosecution of an individual caught with illegal drugs, hard illegal drugs, and be willing to give a little to get more. So what I'm saying is it's not about money, about how many convictions do we have, what's our percentage, or how much money are we making on it. It's getting to the source of the problem, and that's where I always believe we have to go. You can't talk about the collateral issues, you got to go to the basic problem.
You said earlier you're the one candidate with experience in all different all different types of law. I think on each side of the room. Which side do you enjoy the most? Which side do you think you're the best at? Easy question, right?
Criminal law, you're more freewheeling. It's fun, and you get to be on criminal defense, even prosecution. I haven't done any prosecution, but as I've watched my prosecutor opponents, you can be more freewheeling. You can be open. You can experiment with more. The pace is faster. Oftentimes, civil it drags, and so criminal's a lot of fun. At this point in my career, I've also been able to pick and choose which cases I like. And so when you make a steady diet of criminal defense, then you have to take whatever comes to the door. So criminal is probably the most fun. Sometimes the most challenging is civil, especially complex civil cases, and especially fraud. Civil fraud cases are tough. And so I like the challenge of chasing things down. I like investigative work. I like knowing what I'm going after and how to get them. I represent a lot of people that have been defrauded, and it's fun chasing assets all over the United States, sometimes overseas.
Speaking of law, Andy had the story about the Bar Association's poll.
The Bar Association.
It wasn't so friendly to you, but you kind of told him that it doesn't really matter to you.
No, actually, I was busy, but that's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, what should a person know when they see other lawyers saying, giving these sorts of ratings? Why do you think that is? Is that a worry that you don't get rated highly by this particular group of people?
I don't see that at all. Matter of fact, first of all, the prosecutor's bar. I've never joined the Kitsap County Prosecutor's Bar, and I haven't belonged to a local bar association in a number of years. I find that joining just to join or the like just isn't what I do. With regards to, and it's my understanding that a number of the members of the Kitsap County Bar Association were prosecutors. They have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, and that's to be expected. Some of the others have said, that I'm unqualified. I'm now working with a 300-member law firm out of Florida. And they seem to think I'm qualified, and they've retained me as local counsel. I find the approach that somehow this bar poll indicates that either I'm qualified or not qualified to be at best unreliable, at best. And I think this is more of a us against the outsider, maybe. That might be it. Don't know. But does it bother me? No.
What about your experience, because part of the office, obviously, you need to be an attorney, but also there's a manager, administrative, I mean, that's a great part of the work also. What in your personality or your personal experience, your career history says, I'm good at that side of the job?
Okay, mentoring. And this is where I've worked with a lot of young attorneys that are getting started, and some of them have started out with just hanging their shingle, which is usually a rude awakening for them as to how the system works. The law school teaches you one thing, reality is completely another. And I recognize strengths, I recognize weaknesses, where they need to work. If they're having trouble with, say, discovery, or issues of discovery, or even personality issues, you know, dealing with another attorney, because we do have conflicts with each other. My ability is to understand the best person for the best job, and knowing how they work, and if they're either they need training, or they need education, or they need further experience in an area. I understand that. Because of the extensive experience in different areas, I recognize when somebody's making a mistake, or they're moving down the wrong path, or this isn't the way to do it. I'm always open to change my mind and to learn new things. I'd be a fool not to. But to recognize someone's strengths and being able to utilize those strengths is where I think I really shine. And being willing to work, not to oversee and to lord over, but to really help develop someone and make them a better lawyer, make them a better person in the process. And one of the things that I'd like to instill in that is, one of the concerns I've always had in the practice of law, especially during the early days, you know, my first 10 years, it was go, 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 is that you want to make sure that the individual doesn't lose themselves in the job, that they still retain some individual identity, and that they're human beings, and that they can get up in the morning and still enjoy going to work and still enjoy things outside of work. In the legal profession, that oftentimes isn't the case. You start to see burnout, and you start to see that reflected in the way the individual treats other individuals in their office, outside their office. And so that is that, again, comprehensive approach I take to working with attorneys. And one of the things I do with younger attorneys is don't lose sight of what's important, don't lose sight of being able to enjoy life too. And that's the kind of attitude I want to bring to the prosecutor's office.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Sure.
Early on, you mentioned the gun club
Sure.
incident. Had you been prosecutor, how would that have been handled differently?
The gun club incident, you're
Or
talking
the
about with the
ongoing-
permitting. Oh, yeah.
The ongoing gun club, wanting it to be shut down.
Shut down, okay. I can tell you that I would have, it's been represented, and it's falsely represented, that the gun club had not responded to requests and inquiries with regards to issues, and that is not the case. The gun club responded within 10 days. The next time the gun club heard anything was, of course, the lawsuit. How would I have handled it differently? I would have tried to sit down and meet with the gun club. That's the simple way of doing it. Saying, these are my concerns, let's talk about them. Informal meeting. There is no reason we have to start a lawsuit. Can we address these issues? Can we fix these things? Are there really issues here? And that's the first way of doing it. Another way I strongly recommend in every case, I do this in domestic cases and I do it in civil cases, mediation. Let's figure it out early. Let's see if we can come to some type of resolution sooner rather than later. If we can figure out where we agree, then we can concentrate on where we disagree and whether there's a genuine issue. So that's how I would approach that case. And I would approach virtually every conflict, unless you have, and then the prosecutor could of course say, well, we had this immediate danger of strikes or something. Well, it's been 80 years and that hasn't happened yet. So, but mediation, early talk, communication, that's a simple way of doing it.
You know, it's kind of funny, and having dealt with the Department of Community Development before I retired extensively, do you think there was any collusion there between them and the prosecutor's office with regard to the gun club? Because it sure seems like there might be behind the scenes stuff there. And maybe this is an improper question,
You already asked it.
But it just seems funny to me that all of a sudden here they're involved, and after the fact they find out that they didn't get permits, and it just seems weird to me.
I think there are a number of irregularities, and I'm not sure what's going on. This strikes me as odd in that our prosecutor's office is the legal arm, yet somehow they seem to be distant from everything, and then after the fact, they're in there. And I don't know, as to collusion,
Maybe that was
that
the
means
wrong term, it's a harsh term, but
it is a harsh term. Well, they're working together. That much is a given, because the prosecutor's office is supposed to be providing legal counsel to the gun club, or not the gun club, but to the DCD, and their dealings with the gun club. This is where, and it came up at Eggs and Issues again today, and I want to mention this, is that our current prosecutor talked about representing the different departments and doing more or less what they say. This is, these are my marching orders. The prosecutor's office is different than that. They stand in a special fiduciary relationship, not only to the government, but to the citizens, more importantly. And so, in my opinion, the prosecutor's office has not fully informed different divisions, the DCD in particular, as to problems and solutions. And instead of taking a hard nose, I'm going after a gun club and trying to figure out how to resolve it. And there's been some friction, I must add, between DCD and the gun club before that. Matter of fact, there's a long history. One of the primary investigators had been turned in to the local government for his attitude and things like that. Now he's leading the charge against the gun club. I question why he's still involved, but that's not my department.
Good.
Yep.
Well, thanks. We will let you close. Anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to leave us with? I thought we got most of the issues, but we'll give you another minute and just cap it off with what you'd like to leave.
And you'll stop me in a minute, won't you?
We'll let you finish your thought.
Good luck, kid.
Thanks. I'm probably going to need it now.
No, it's not. We're a little looser on that.
All right. Well, getting back to it's a broad spectrum of experience, and I fully respect the other candidates who are running for office, and I applaud their efforts and what they've done, and they also recognize there's a problem. 47% of the citizens of Kitsap County recognized there was a problem last time I ran, but I'm the one who recognized the problem early on and started attacking it. There's that complex interplay between the different areas of the law. To effectively manage the office, you have to know the different areas of the law, because you have to know what the problems are. I was thinking of an analogy today, and oftentimes aircraft carriers are captained by a former pilot. Why? Because he knows what it's like to fly a plane and try to land that plane. Same thing with civil litigation, criminal litigation, and domestic relations litigation. I would wager, other than possibly the current or incumbent, that I'm the only one that's done all three types of trials, and numerous of them. And so it's that experience from start to finish that gives me an edge over, I believe, the other candidates. I have the ability, I have the skills, I have the willingness to work with anyone, and I'm also firm in my convictions and willing to stand up and say what's wrong, but I'm also willing to listen. And for that reason, I think I'm the best candidate.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.